Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, how's everybody doing this morning?
Yeah.
We've made it to another Friday.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious us. All righty, let me tell you about what's happening around the world. Israel has, of course, continued its bombing. Israeli bombing has caused large explosions just outside Beirut International Airport during a further night of airstrikes targeting Hezbollah in the city. Lebanon's public health ministry said 37 people have been killed in Israeli ground and air attacks in the last 24 hours alone, while 150 others have been wounded. Elsewhere, the Lebanese army said 2 of its soldiers had also been killed in the country's south as Israeli forces pressed on with their invasion against Hezbollah and ordered another 20 towns and villages to evacuate. Now, at least 9 Israeli soldiers have been killed in clashes with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, where Israel announced the start of what it says is a limited ground incursion earlier this week. Meanwhile, the region is continuing to brace for Israeli retaliation following an Iranian ballistic missile attack. To the United States now, and US elections, of course, as well as the outcome of that vote, and how it will likely come down to 7 key swing states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin too. Well, looking at Michigan specifically, its status as a presidential swing state is somewhat a new phenomenon. From 1992 to 2012, Democratic presidential candidates consistently won Michigan by around 5 to 10 percentage points. But back in 2016, Trump flipped the states, winning by a very thin margin of 0.2 points. Now, black voters make up about 13% of Michigan's electorate, and in 2020, 92% supported Biden. That's according to exit polls. But so far in 2024, Kamala Harris seems to be running way behind that benchmark. An average of polls conducted in Michigan since September 4th shows the Democratic share of the black electorate has dropped by a precipitous 21 points on margin since 2020. That would truly be a seismic shift in Michigan politics. But there are reasons to believe that those numbers may not fully materialize come election day. And lastly, the British government has agreed to hand sovereignty of the long-contested Chagos Islands, an archipelago of more than 60 islands in the Indian Ocean, to Mauritius, in a deal to secure the future of a strategically important UK-US military base. Now, British Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the agreement will secure the future of the base, which was built in the 1970s at Diego Garcia, which is the largest in the chain of those islands off the tip of India, that has been under British control for more than 50 years. The military base, which is home to about 2,500 personnel, which are mainly Americans, has been involved in military operations, including the 2003 war in Iraq and the long-running war in Afghanistan. So it's quite a significant issue that we're seeing there. However, 1,500 inhabitants, native people from the Chagos Islands, were displaced in order to make way for this US base in what Human Rights Watch said amounted to crimes against humanity committed by a colonial power against an indigenous people. Chagosian Voices, which is a UK-based group representing the Chagosian diaspora around the world, voiced its own disappointment in this deal, being that negotiations excluded the people who had been displaced all of those years ago in order to build that military base.
So there are very big fears as regards Michigan, and I'm really scared. I'm really scared for Harris. Looks like Trump is going to tip the balance. And it's
in
not
Michigan or
yes.
as a whole?
As a whole. When you check a couple of the swing states or the battleground states, Penn is neck and neck, very deep. Probably the other areas that the Democrats have an advantage, Wisconsin. But I'm shocked because up till the 2016 election, Wisconsin used to be a strong heartland for the Democrats. I go back to 88 elections again. Wisconsin was so Democratic that Michael Dukakis won Wisconsin. But when you also check the other states, it's pretty much neck and neck. Penn is neck and neck. And when you check, I think Ned Silver did a poll recently where he was showing that in the electoral balance, Trump has a greater possibility of getting to 270 threshold before Harris.
Right.
She's also not been helped by the fact that this war went on. You remember what the Arabs said in Michigan, even what they did to Joe Biden in the primaries. About 100,000 voted against him, and now the numbers are not moving for her. So she needs to rally around.
She has to.
And that's why she's been doing a lot. She's got some support. Liz Cheney is out campaigning with her.
Daughter, yes.
The Cheney's daughter,
yes.
former vice president daughter. Let's see how that pans out. But it's getting a little too late for me. And 30 days to the elections, I might just call it a Trump election.
Yeah.
Sad reality. If Harris wins, I'll be surprised. But it's looking like it's going to be a Trump thing to lose.
So Chagos Island getting its sovereignty, I think that's really an interesting matter, an issue that's come up. But the most significant thing for me, and I'll go back to why this is important, is that despite the fact that they've been granted sovereignty by the United Kingdom, and by the way, it might interest some people to know that the United Kingdom still has overseas territory in places like Falkland Islands, Cayman Island, Turks and Caicos, and a few other territories like that. And if you look at it, it's usually because there's some form of interest in that regard. This conversation around giving sovereignty to Chagos Island has been ongoing, like you said, for many years. But there are interests there, especially, as you said, from the military base in Diego Garcia. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Diego Garcia is not going to be part of this full sovereignty. In fact, the main bone of contention, which is this island, is still going to remain under British care for the next 99 years. And then you wonder why, you give sovereignty when you're still able to protect your interests. People have said, oh, perhaps this move has been made or this agreement has come to because of trying to engender goodwill with the African continent, geopolitical issues around the world in Ukraine, trying to garner support from African nations and get that kind of, support. But I don't know to what extent that support will be, since Diego Garcia is still not part of that agreement. And like was mentioned, those who were displaced and what has been an abuse of human rights are excluded as well. Correct. So for me, it's not a complete package until Diego Garcia also goes back to the original owners of that island. So I don't know if I should celebrate yet for the sovereignty given to Chagos Island.
The story about Chagos Islands is as follows. That 60 islands, a total of 60 islands by the tip of the Indian Ocean, had been under control of the British since 1814. In 1960, Mauritius gained independence. Now, when Mauritius gained independence, yes, Britain agreed, but decided to hold on to those islands in the Chagos Islands. Now, and then decided much later to establish a military base. It's a UK-US military base in a place called Diego Garcia. Now, because of that, the people of Diego Garcia, who were displaced since 1960, they've gone to court, they fought, courts in England, courts at the international scene. In 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled that, look, that was an unfair resolution of the decolonization process. Now that Keir Starmer has handed over, sovereignty to Mauritius over those islands, where even some British are not happy with it. Daily Mail says it is Starmer's surrender.
Yes.
And that this is a confusing thing, and that this is capitulation on the part of Keir Starmer. But what has happened is that, one, the completion of the decolonization process over Mauritius. Number two is that it is a triumph for the people of Diego Garcia, where you have the military base. Because what it means is that there's justice for them at last, because they now have control over their land.
Right.
Three, David Lammy had pointed out that, look, as part of the proposed agreement, Britain would hold on to Diego Garcia for the next 99 years, and it will pay Mauritius for staying there. So that's part of the agreement. That's the clarity about the status of Diego Garcia. However, this raises questions, again, about the decolonization process. Because the government of Gibraltar has issued a statement to say that, okay, you have done this for the Chagos Islands, for Mauritius.
Yes.
How about Gibraltar, which
Spain, I think
has not also experienced, the completion of the decolonization process, with David Lammy, in fact, saying that we're still going to hold on to Gibraltar. So it's about colonialism and its aftermath and the commitment of the colonial powers to the process of decolonization. As for Israel, yes, Israel has made it very clear through Lieutenant General Haves that, look, the demolition of Hezbollah will be total, that everything related to Hezbollah will be, brought down. And they've said, okay, they are going to do localized, targeted, limited onslaught. What this latest alert that they are given to civilians means is that ground invasion is going to go beyond the UN limited areas, and that it will be a broader thing. Yes. But the bigger question coming from the Middle East is President Biden telling Israel not to touch nuclear sites, but we are discussing if we may attack oil installations. If oil installations are attacked, maybe oil price will go up to $200 per barrel.
And
well, there are other issues. Whether Nigeria will be able to manage that development if it happens.
If it happens. Thank you all for your comments. Let's move on now to newspaper headlines across the globe. And as ever, we'll begin in Nigeria with This Day newspaper. And one of the stories on the front page of This Day this morning looks at criticism women in northern Nigeria have directed towards President Bola Ahmed Tinubu over the recent appointment of an all-male board membership of the Northwest Development Commission. The group of women, which include Asmau Joda and Aisha Oyebode, say the move by the president went against the national gender policy of 35% affirmative action, which he had promised in all of his appointments. The New Telegraph leads with universities on the verge of shutting down due to high electricity bills. Lecturers at polytechnic institutions say they may withdraw their services over a list of unresolved demands as they issue a 15-day ultimatum to the federal government. And staying with education, The Guardian reports on the state of teachers. Now, tomorrow is World Teachers' Day, and teachers in Nigeria have for decades been battling with the federal government to improve the fortunes of educators by among a list of issues, including paying them living wages. Now, teachers say that they too are faced with the reality of untimely deaths, poor work environments, and the rising cost of living. Now, the caricature on the front page shows a teacher asking students if they too would like to become a teacher, and one student in the class says that politics is more lucrative. Now, can you imagine? Now, speaking of politics, the Vanguard leads with the minimum wage and how there's disquiet over the federal government making selective payments. Now, Labour has hit back, saying the federal government is insensitive to the suffering of workers, and that's as workers say that they are forced to sleep in the office or walk to work as they can no longer afford transport. The Punch has the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, the NNPCL, and their pledge of 272,500 barrels per day of crude oil through a series of crude for loan deals totaling $8.86 billion. By pledging those 272,500 barrels daily, it means that more than 8 million barrels of crude will be used for different loan deals by the national oil firm on a monthly basis. This is according to analysis of a report by the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative and the NNPC's financial statements. Moving on to African papers now, and Ghana's Daily Graphic leads with news that nearly all the streetlights installed along the 19-kilometer stretch of the Accra-Tema motorway have disappeared in just 3 years. Now, according to the article, a number of authorities were involved in the installation of those lights, including Ghana's Highway Authority, the Ministry of Roads and Highways, as well as the Energy Ministries, all of them pointing fingers at each other, and so far no one knows where all of these lights have gone. And here's to hoping there won't be any casualties on the motorway with the lack of light. The Citizen of South Africa reports on the 200 pilots and aircrew personnel who may be working using compromised licenses. This all follows on from an earlier investigation, which we also mentioned in a newspaper review a few weeks ago, by South African Airways, which looked into a doctor approving staff for work who did not actually have the authority to do so. Let's take a look now at British newspapers, and the Daily Express has Dame Esther Ranson on the front cover on how she believes she may well be alive to see assisted dying legalised in the United Kingdom. This is after Kim Leadbeater MP takes up the fight to introduce the bill into Commons. It's quite a historic vote that will be going on. And then lastly, The Guardian also leads with this historic vote given to MPs on assisted dying.
All right. Fortunately, so many stories to get through, but we're out of time. But that Ghana story shows that whether it's in Ghana, Nigeria, African countries, the government has its role to do, but the people themselves must also take responsibility for certain things that happen. But thank you so much.
Always
Adefemi.
a pleasure.